This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Coming up on This Week in Agribusiness, pork industry attitudes far more downbeat this year at the World Pork Expo. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson in the studio this week, but we will be hearing from Max Armstrong later on in the program. Before we do, however, last week I had the opportunity to attend the World Pork Expo, and I was stunned by the downbeat attitude of many attendees. I had the chance to talk with Mike Porth from Partners for Production Agriculture about how the hog industry has turned in the last 6 months.
We're sitting here and we're looking at a huge cash burn at the current market situation. But what's led to it? You know, you come out of 2021, unbelievable demand for U.S. pork, not just here, but also abroad. And then we come into 2022, great exports, good demand, maybe a little bit less. And truly, when you look at this year, demand's okay. It's just not what we've seen the last couple years. And then when you throw into where we're at with all of the different things that are going on from pricing and production and health issues, you would say, boy, it looked like a good year going into the first part of the year. We had $100 to $108 summer futures and like, hey, here we go. And then we started seeing a little more supply than what our December hogs and pigs. And then that showed a little bit more when we got into March, and we're starting to see some numbers come at us. And then you throw in some of the other things that we are fighting, as we'll talk about with Prop 12, Massachusetts Question 3, Olymel closing plants, we're closing plants. So you throw that all together, and we're in a bad cash burn right now from a producer standpoint and from a packer standpoint.
Does it look like it's getting any better? Have we burned enough excess supply out of the industry, or is that still ahead of us, Mike?
So I think we're seeing a cash market here the last couple of weeks. Thankfully here during the World Pork Expo, there is a few smiles out there. But yes, we are reducing, but that's our normal trend as we go into summer. As we go into this fall, I'm afraid to say I see some production picking up. Sow health overall is maybe getting a little bit better. We're seeing that trends, but I tell you what, we're going to be fighting some of the Olymel plant closures. That's probably in the August, September timeline. We're going to see wean pigs come south. We're going to see market hogs come south. And I think that's going to throw some bear into this market. And then when we get into fall time, we start seeing normal numbers as you know it, and then going into the holidays. So I think we have to get past the first of the year.
It sounds as though those headwinds for the hog industry are expected to continue. That was Mike Porth from Partners for Production Agriculture. Now on grain farms this time of year across the country, a lot of activity is at hand. We're top dressing nitrogen, perhaps getting some spraying done, and all of those things, visibility is important. And remote display capabilities perhaps allow that visibility to happen. Our own Willie Vogt had the chance recently to travel to Kentucky to see how a farm operation in that state is using the John Deere Operations Center.
So we traveled to Barlow, Kentucky for Tech at Work this time out on a windy day to talk with Neil Denton about his use of John Deere Operations Center. He shares some insight on how he's using that data to better manage all parts of his operation.
Well, we've always tried to use technology to advance ourselves here out on the farm. And we just felt like we're spending so much money out in the fields that we just needed some more analytics to be able to take a look at everything that we were doing, make sure that what we were doing was profitable, and make sure that what we're doing is correct, and not just taking an approach of just guessing or hoping that we're improving ourselves by spending more money each year.
Diagnosing area codes using RDA helps because we can see it in real time. So as soon as something triggers, we could also see what state we're in when it did trigger that DTC, and we're able to hopefully get a diagnosis on what it was doing, when it was throwing that code, and it really helps us out to help remote support without actually being at the machine.
So one aspect of precision agriculture that's been a big change over the last few years is what's called remote display access. John Perkins, a precision ag specialist with Hudson Equipment, explains what that means and how he can use it to better serve customers and how farmers can benefit from having that kind of information.
From connection point back, then offset to the side. Remote display access helps in a lot of different ways, especially if you're a owner-operator and you have multiple operators. You can check on them and then help them dial in how they're trying to set their piece of equipment, whether that be planting, spraying, harvesting, anything in between, as they can go in there and show them where to dial things in and set up things, as well as for us as support. It really helps us without having to drive out to the machine and saves a lot of time.
A lot of times it's something simple that we can fix, so it eliminates our lost time in the field and makes us more productive each day and keeps us efficient.
From having information to better manage all aspects of the operation, to remote access to information that helps the dealer better serve his business, Neil Denton is benefiting with the use of John Deere Operations Center. Reporting for This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Willie Vogt.
Thanks to Willie Vogt for bringing that look at the John Deere Operations Center. It's incredible just how much information can be accessed remotely anymore with a little bit of internet in the field. Folks, we will have more Tech at Work coming. The next one, Willie returns to the Mountain West to see usage out there. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. It's time to take a look at the markets. Joining us this week is Dan Huber, author of the Huber Report. And Dan, all minds seem to be on weather when it comes to the new crop right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, granted, it is the time of the year, but a little questionable weather here. I mean, certainly dry in a good portion of the upper Midwest, and not a lot of moisture in the forecast. So it's going to keep markets on pins and needles for a while. But to this point, at least, nobody's ready to start reducing yield estimates. But it's that could come later. So yeah.
It could indeed come later. And Dan, before we get into the real weather market market actions, let's talk about the WASDE report. Came out last week. Supply and demand estimates. Any big shifts that the trade was watching?
It's certainly nothing large. I think the increase in projected increase in bean carryover was maybe a touch more than the trade was anticipating, but certainly not market-shaking news. I think weather has overridden that at this point, but I think that is something we can't lose track of. Once we move beyond this weather situation, which what are we talking? Maybe 30 days at best. That we tend to focus on that, but not only domestically on corn and beans, not on wheat, but globally, all three commodities, we're seeing pretty sizable increases in projected carryouts. And yes, some of that's going to be predicated on how good next South American crop is. But that said, the old rule of thumb is if we're seeing growing global supplies, it's going to be defensive on the prices. So.
And that leads us to this new crop conversation. Dan, we've had some back and forth here in the trade. This weather market is on traders' minds. How do you manage that risk for producers watching that new crop grow in the field?
Again, I mean, it's always the difficult point at this time of year, particularly if your crops are under a little bit of stress. But, we have really seen a 10 to 15% rallies here in the last month. So it's rewarded some patience here, but with corn now pressing back up into that 550 plus area for new crop, and soybeans, again have rallied back up to very solid resistance here. It would seem to be time to pull some trigger and just believe that we're going to stay within historical averages on production, and realistically on some of the even corn, especially corn. Boy, you could lose 2-3 bushel the acre nationwide, and it's not going to change the picture all that dramatically. So
still going to have ample supplies.
Absolutely.
Dan, that's a very similar story that's been playing out on the other side of the feed grains ledger with wheat. We've seen that market buffeted quite a bit recently. Where do you see wheat going from here?
Wheat, of course, it's probably the international scene that you have to look at more closely. Domestically, we're looking at another reduction in projected ending stocks. Certainly not a great-looking crop this year, but worldwide, I think we've cut back on usage. Interestingly enough, when you look at all the events that have happened in the world wheat market in the last 2 to 3 months, even the flooding with the dam bombing in Ukraine, taking out it was a very productive ground in Ukraine. Massive rains in China's wheat-producing areas. Predictions now that the Australian crop is probably going to fall shorter this coming year. And the market really has not responded much. And I think that kind of is a key there, that psychologically this market is just not looking at increased demand, and lower stocks potentially is not going to bother us that bad.
Is that bearish attitude keeping the managed money, that investor money, out of commodities right now?
Oh, I think so. I think it's been exiting. It's been looking for greener pastures elsewhere. I'm not sure if they found them just yet, but I mean, if you use crude oil as the bellwether, and certainly crude oil is the factor that brings people in and out of the commodity sector as a whole. I mean, that is such a big play in all of our lives. And even 2 weeks ago when Saudis announced they were going to cut back another 1 million barrels a day, the markets really could care less. And I think it's, they're looking at slowing economies around the world and less demand for commodities, period.
All right, things to keep an eye on as we roll deeper into the summer. We'll have more with Dan Huber when we return. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. We're back talking markets with Dan Huber of the Huber Report. And Dan, we were talking about the investment money here just before we went to break. We saw the Federal Reserve this week hold on their rate hiking action. Is this positive for commodities?
Well, of course, that was as expected that they would hold rates. Positive in the respect that that's probably not dollar positive. And of course, a higher dollar tends to deter people from the commodity markets. But that said, they did come back and say that we'll probably look at 2 more rate hikes yet this year. Probably will not see any decreases in rates at least until sometime in the next year. So they're just kind of tweaking at this point. Again, it was not by no means a shock to the markets, and as witnessed in most of the trade of the bonds and notes and equities this morning, like it was they knew it was coming. So another day, and of course with an extended weekend coming up, a lot of people are not really all that excited about doing much new here to begin with. So.
That makes sense. Dan, these interest rate discussions we've been having, of course, it all comes back to inflation. Sure. On the inflation front, have we won that battle? Where do you see it going from here?
Every sign says inflation is tempering. It has certainly come off of the highs it was here back earlier in the spring. Chances are it's probably going to slow down, or at least slow down the decline. We know the employment situation remains quite robust. And they seem to even temper their discussion on that in the Post comments yesterday, that yes, we still watch that, but we recognize that's not the only thing. If you went back 6-8 months ago, everyone would probably have said, well, we need to really cut into and make a recession basically to start losing the job growth that's out there. They've kind of tempered away from that and thinking that we can bring inflation down with some other factors, particularly when it comes to the real estate sector and those, and we have seen results. We've seen those markets slow down pretty dramatically over the last 6 months. And
we still seem to see, at least, Dan, looking at the meat case, consumers with plenty on cash on hand. They're out there, they're buying this, particularly beef. All right. Where do you see this cattle market moving from here? And
again, a historic move in every respect in the cattle market, pushing into record highs. It doesn't seem that it's done yet, but boy, you have to believe that we're going to start getting pushback, particularly with competition with the other meats. Last weekend we had a family coming in, so I picked up a pork shoulder, 99 cents a pound. How do you try to compare that to beef that's 7 or 8 times higher than that? So granted, we've been talking for months and months that the worries about what the economy is going to do, that there could be a recession, is going to start cutting in this meat demand. And boy, to this point it has not. But everything reaches a point where it's going to snap back and at least bring the two back closer together. So.
And it does seem like at least that choice beef demand, Dan, is kind of a nice proxy for how the economy is faring.
Exactly. People feeling good, or maybe it's the luxury they still want to enjoy in life about it. And this is the season where people do fire up the grills. So at least for the next 30 days, hopefully we see some continuing demand in that beef sector. So.
But as you mentioned, Dan, these are record prices.
Oh,
so
yes.
It might be
Absolutely.
time to manage some of that risk.
Exactly. I wouldn't want to load the freezer up with it right now either. So yeah.
Store it in the freezer. Love it. Store it cold. Folks,
Yes.
We've been talking markets here with Dan Huber, author of the Huber Report. Dan, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. Each week, our friend Chad Colby sends us a look at some new technology in the world of agriculture. It's my personal favorite when he's showing us some machinery. And a few weeks ago, he did our little side-by-side comparison on lawnmowers. This week, he goes a little bigger.
It's not uncommon during the spring to have to utilize some new technology to feed the crop. Farmers Randy been side dressing for as long as I can remember. Talk a little bit about some of the new technology you've got in your machine this year that's actually pretty intriguing.
So we're running wide drops on our fast side dress bar just for better placement. But then we went in and added EM Flow Sense, which is a turbineless flow meter on each row, just so we could make sure that each row's running no plugged hoses, things like that.
You know, Randy, I've noticed over the years there's actually some individual row controls guys are using with side dress, just like you do in a conventional sprayer. Do you think you need that technology moving forward, or do you think this shows you that you're accurate enough in side dress? Is that what you were looking for?
That was what we were looking for. At this point, I think we're okay staying with the 5-section control that it has. If we were doing wanted better control, we could go in and add it. I don't think it's going to be where we're going to go at this point.
So talk a little bit operationally inside the cab. You got all kinds of monitors in here, Randy. Talk a little bit about operationally how this system works.
So our bar is controlled by our ag leader in command monitor that's in there. It's running a variable rate script as he's going back and forth, and then also guiding the tractor. And then we have our Gen 3 2020 from Precision Planting that's reading all of the EM flow senses and mapping.
Is everybody playing nice together, Randy?
You know, we went into this and Precision's going, this isn't necessarily a supported scenario, and actually it's working really well.
Yeah, that's what you were telling me last week when we talked about it. What have you learned with this technology? It's something new. You didn't make the big investment for individual control. You went this route. Is that kind of the aha moment, is maybe I don't have to invest that much money to have that kind of information that you need to just know you're doing a good job?
Right. It's kind of like when we first started putting monitors on planters, just to make sure that, hey, that row didn't stop running. Right. Because 24-row bar, you can have rows plug and you don't know it until a month from now.
Right.
So,
Randy, I may remember a day when you took off the Coulter and you put a Y drop on the first time. I think I might have been there. Mm-hmm. What was that, 8 or 9 years ago or something crazy?
It's been quite a few years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Randy, thanks for sharing it. I think that's part of the interesting thing about technology today. You hear opportunities like Randy had to maybe take some technology and try some things different, and this is a great example of that. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. It's neat to see how Randy grew more comfortable with that technology over time, and I think it explains the value of giving new technology a try. Always appreciate Chad Colby's updates. Folks, stick around. Later on in the program, meteorologist Greg Stolye will join us, and we'll dig into the forecast for the week ahead. Welcome back, folks. Now it's time to turn to our friend Charlie Behrens for another edition of Ag States of America. And this week, he's highlighting one of the most photogenic states here in this nation.
The United States of America can be very different from one state to another. But one thing every state has in common is agriculture.
Hey everyone, I'm Charlie Behrens and welcome back to the Agricultural States of America, where we explore the agriculture of different states and hopefully give you some more appreciation for all the great things that farmers are producing across America. Now, today's state gained notoriety from several popular films, including Field of Dreams starring Kevin Costner, Bridges of Madison County with Clint Eastwood, or Twister starring the prized 1995 Iowa State Fair Cow of the Year, Old Betsy. Rest in pieces. Anyway, let's get back on track. Today we're talking about Iowa, sometimes referred to as the Hawkeye State or the Tall Corn State. Iowa sits in the upper Midwest between the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. It's like a big river sandwich, and it's incredibly fortunate to have some of the most productive soil in the world. In fact, the National Laboratory for Agriculture and the Environment declared the soil in one Iowa county to be among the richest in the world, which is why they celebrate Black Dirt Days. Now, I gotta confess, I don't know what goes on at Black Dirt Days, but you probably want to bring your boots. With such fertile soil, Iowa is also recognized as the best place on the entire planet to grow corn, which explains why corn has been the state's top crop for over 150 years. Corn is so popular in Iowa, they used to call their school-age kids children of the corn. But for obvious reasons, they had to do a little rebranding. Anyway, these days, Iowa farmers grow about 2.3 billion bushels of corn on nearly 13 million acres of land, making Iowa the #1 corn-producing export state in the Union. Through the years, corn has shaped Iowa agriculture, bringing in cattle, hog, chicken, turkey, and egg farmers, along with countless other agribusinesses who rely on corn to feed or add value to their products. In addition to animal feed, Iowa corn is converted into ethanol fuel, starches, sweeteners, and over 4,000 everyday products. Now, not to be corny here, but I think it is safe to say that Iowa is truly the cream of the crop.
Ridiculous.
Also, Iowa has become the second leading state, only behind California, in total egg exports worth more than $10 billion each year. One of those corn feeding benefactors are Iowa's pig farmers, who lead the nation, raising over 48 million hogs each year, or about a third of all pork raised in the entire United States. Iowa's egg farmers also lead the nation, with over 55 million laying hens that produce nearly 16 billion eggs per year. That's basically 1 out of every 6 eggs produced in the US. And before I get tempted to crack some egg yolks, let's talk about growing techniques. Farmers don't plant corn on the same ground year after year. In fact, farmers in Iowa and many other parts of the country found it best to rotate corn with another amazing crop, the soybean, making Iowa the #2 grower of soybeans in the nation. Soybeans are technically a legume, like peanuts, and legumes actually feed nitrogen into the soil as they grow. This reduces the amount of nitrogen farmers need to put on a field to grow corn the next year. Think of it like switching to a light beer. It's a bit of a different taste, still gets you buzzed, provides all the nutrients. At least that's what my doctor told me. Now, if you want to experience all of Iowa's agriculture in one place, it is all on display at the Iowa State Fair, one of the biggest and best fairs in the nation, and definitely the place to see and smell Iowa's agriculture. They've got more than 50 food items served on a stick, including pork chops, hard-boiled eggs, deep-fried apple pie, peanut butter, and jelly, and yes, even salad on a stick. And that's what we call a balanced meal in the Midwest. Oh, also, the salad on a stick stand is right next door to the Tums on a stick stand. I suggest you start with that one. All right, that's all the time we have for now. But as always, go to pivotbio.com/agstates and click on the show icon to explore more about the agriculture of your favorite states and test your knowledge to win great prizes and more. I'm Charlie Behrens, and we'll see you next time on the Agricultural States of America.
Well, thank you, Charlie, for that look at Iowa. Folks, for those of you who don't know, I am a born and raised Iowa boy. I have a tremendous amount of pride in the Hawkeye State, and I think Charlie did a really good job highlighting a lot of what Iowa brings to the table. But he left off one of my favorite stories, and it's a story that comes from my hometown, East Peru, Iowa, in the central southern part of the state. In the late 1800s, there was a Quaker family that lived there by the name of the Hyatts. Jesse Hyatt was the patriarch of the family, and in the early 1890s, he had a tree growing in his apple orchard. He cut it down twice, but it kept coming back. So finally, he decided to let it grow, and in 1892, it grew and produced its first apples. They became the Red Delicious apple. First grown ever in my hometown in East Peru, Iowa. Iowa, in fact, was a very strong apple producer across the country. Beginning with the Red Delicious and several of the other old line varieties, Iowa apple production actually increased every year until the Armistice Day frost of 1944 decimated the Iowa apple industry, encouraged producers to start looking for more climatologically friendly homes for apples, and they found the Pacific Northwest. The Armistice Day frost in Iowa pushed apple production to the Pacific Northwest, so you're welcome, Washington and Oregon, for sending that business your way. Folks, stay tuned. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness here when we return.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Farmers love their equipment brands, but knowing the company behind those brands can sometimes be a different story. Dave Postel, AGI's Senior Vice President of Global Marketing and Customer Experience, says that even though folks don't always know his company's abbreviated name, AGI, they certainly know and have worked with one of his products. Dave, you're out on a mission to help farmers get to know AGI. Can you tell us the AGI story?
Yeah, and thanks, Mike, for having me here. I'm glad to tell you a little bit about AGI. AGI actually is a manufacturer of equipment, solutions, and technology for farm, for feed, and for food sectors. We started about 20 years ago in Western Canada, and we've always been deeply connected to the farm. In fact, our three founders, two brothers and a best friend, started in a place called Swift Current, Saskatchewan. They started with one product, just the three of them, for the farm sector. And as fate would have it, became unbelievably successful, growing the business over 25 years from that little startup to a company now that reaches all over the globe. We sell into about 100 countries, and we're headquartered here in Canada and in the US. And we've become an incredible farm success story. Like you say, more known by the brands we offer than AGI. But as we grow and evolve and we become bigger in the world, we want people to associate those brands they know and trust, like Westfield, like Batco, like Nico, with AGI.
Absolutely. So I was just going to ask you to outline some of the ways that U.S. farmers might encounter some of the brands, Dave.
Yeah, the interesting thing is when you talk to them, they'll tell you, I'm not sure I know AGI. But then when you mention our brands, well, we're pretty much on every grain farm in North America. So consider dryers and Nico, storage and MFS and Weststeel, Batco conveyors, Westfield augers. You know, you consider all of the equipment, we pretty much touch just about every grain farm in North America.
Dave, what do you want farmers to know?
Well, we really want them to know that we're listening and that we're interested and that we want them to do better in their own farm and on their fields. And to do that, we focus on really three things. We focus on safety, we focus on profitability, and we focus on innovation. Farming is a dangerous business and we want farmers to be safe. So everything we do begins from the premise of how can we make our equipment safer to operate, safer to own? Then we challenge ourselves and we go, okay, is this really adding value to the farm? You know, is it helping them save energy costs? Is it helping them be more efficient? Is it helping them get work done faster and easier than it was before? Because, you know, one of the biggest challenges we have on farm is a shortage of labor. So we challenge ourselves and go, hey, we're listening to the needs of the farming community and then trying to make our equipment better every year to address the stuff that's on their minds.
Folks, that's Dave Postel, AGI's Senior Vice President of Global Marketing and Customer Experience. Dave, thanks for joining us this week.
Great to be with you, Mike. Thank you.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, it's time to take a look at the forecast. We've seen weather moving the markets. Greg Solier joins us here. And Greg, what do you expect to see in the Pacific Northwest this week?
Well, there and really across the country, it's the haves versus the have-nots. You always talk about it in some form or in fashion this time of the year, whether it's rain, too much rain, or just not enough rain. And for the time of year here, mid to late June, and an El Nino setup, yeah, this is a correct setup here, but unusually deep and strong. This old and cold upper air loft that's been sitting out across the Pacific. It has finally moved inland, and look at the range of weather from significant moisture across sections of the Pacific Northwest. Oregon, topsoil moisture shortages there equal to what we see across much of the Midwest and parts of the plains. Yes, the higher peaks across the Canadian Rockies and the U.S. Rockies get some wet snow, and off to the east of here we've got the vanguard of a couple of rounds of showers and thunderstorms, heavy and severe, and there's a chill in the air. So yeah, the calendar says mid to late June. It's more or less like a March setup, and not much really significant improvement. The trough moves in a little bit out through the divide into the upper Midwest, northern plains, where we will ignite some severe weather. And with this particular set off, we set off with it hail and damaging winds and downpours of rain. Maybe good news with a rainfall deficit across the Canadian prairie. Not so good the severe weather potential. Some clearing out through the coastal sections of the Pacific Northwest later on into the week. Yes, we have a southern extension of that usually strong and cold trough for the time of year. And of course, off the Pacific coast, not a lot of deep moisture. So despite a couple of showers here into the San Joaquin and Imperial Valley, most of these are dry-based thunderstorms. So we're back into the specter of maybe some lightning and hence fire potential. Into the plains, once again, the setup is getting ripe for that heat north of the hot cap to generate thunderstorms where you come up with these multi-inch rains, big hail, and in some areas of the plains, a little or no organized moisture, but the organization of the upper pattern does remain intact. This trough across the west and southwest. So thunderstorms in the southwest, non-monsoon setup, mind you. Cooler conditions into the Sacramento Valley. The heat and humidity into the plain states, where each and every day storms will flare up there, Mike, and they'll likely be heavy and severe in scattered coverage basis.
Greg, that is a lot of activity there in the West Coast. How does that translate to moisture across the Midwest?
Into the Midwest and the plains. The plains will get into some degree of moisture, some sections of the western Corn Belt with time. But this time of the year, despite this unusually strong trough across the west, you know how those rains in June can be. Hop, skip, and a jump all over creation. In any event, a half dozen drops of rain into the central and southern Corn Belt. The dryness and drought-related issues continue to increase into the southern Great Lakes region, especially in through Michigan and Ohio as well. This weather system, and on the front side, the southwest and northeast upper pattern is usually conducive and will be for storm clusters, all or nothing. We'll get some rain to the Canadian Prairie. We'll get some rain to the northern and central plains, but it may be lightning based as well, farther north and west, with more fire potential. And of course, this time of the year, any time of the year in this setup here, severe weather potential. Western Corn Belt, very warm, some heat up towards the Twins. Not much going on at all over the eastern Corn Belt locales for this week with regard to rainfall. Hang in there, though. Across areas of the deep south, here is the hot ridge from about the Red River Valley of the south on southward. Yes, it's hot, it's humid. You think you can make thunderstorms, but it's hot up aloft as well. Atmosphere is capped here, but we do get these storm clusters to kind of run the periphery of the hot ridge, so perhaps heavy and severe into the Oklahoma Panhandle, Delta region, and points southeast, where we've seen upwards of a half a foot of rain or more the past 5 to 7 days in that particular part of the country. Very little change. Things don't move at all this time of the year in summertime. Heat wave weather pattern here, storm clusters in the pseudo-monsoon upper trough setup. Those could be dry based, and the storm clusters will be heavy and severe. Organized rains for parts of the central plains into the lower Mississippi Valley and southeastern states too there, Mike.
Well, Greg, what do you see as you look all the way to the eastern seaboard?
Just not much going on in that eastern Corn Belt locale. We're into kind of a severe drought mode in this particular area. Widespread and normally dry to moderate drought over the rest of the Corn Belt. Yeah, a couple of showers, 1/10 to 1/4 inch maybe, but this boundary will be the focal point along and south of the Ohio for some shower activity. Note the warm, dry weather across areas of the northeast and New England. A couple of showers and thunderstorms getting severe north and west of the Twins late in the week. A couple of showers Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic region still warm and dry with low afternoon humidity across much of the eastern Corn Belt locale. Southeastern states, here's this boundary. Been a wet season across the southeastern and Mid-Atlantic regions. Storms in through Florida have improved the drought situation. The core of the heat, central and southern Texas, that stays there. Look what comes into position here, a tropical feature in the eastern Gulf. We anticipate this, and with time to move northward into parts of the eastern Corn Belt. We'll talk about that later on in the broadcast.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
And we're back talking weather with meteorologist Greg Solier. Greg, you highlighted some activity coming this next week. Who's going to see what?
Well, in an almost unusual spring/winter setup with this El Nino weather pattern, it is the west and southwest, would you believe, that gets organized moisture. We've seen it already down through Dixie. That comes into play where we really need significant organized moisture, maybe not only early in the week, but again late in the week for parts of the eastern Corn Belt. But again, this will be a corridor of some pretty healthy downpours, and a tropical feature is forecast to organize here, work northward. There's also an absorbed frontal boundary and trough, so we anticipate this with time to probably propagate northward, probably 2 weeks out before we see that. In any event, dry for the upper Midwest, generally drier across the eastern Corn Belt. Look at the moisture across the west and a move into the upper Midwest and the Dakotas with time. And Mike will officially clock into summertime, the summer solstice on the 21st, a little before 10 Central Time.
Well, Greg, by the time we get to that last full week here in June, is it feeling like summer?
It is already, minus the oppressive humidity values as it applies to the Midwest and the upper Midwest Corn Belt locales. Here is the northern extent of that heat wave weather pattern. Still a pretty impressive trough across the west, and cloudiness and tropical moisture keep temperatures below average. Mid-Atlantic region down through Florida. And this is quite unusual. Rain rain, a couple of showers and thunderstorms for California. Most of the organized wet weather and severe upper Midwest. Too hot to make storms down through Texas. And with time, we anticipate not only with this tropical system, but another one in the southwest Atlantic. You get farther in the Atlantic, winds are too strong up aloft, Mike, to get any organization to the tropical scene, but we'll watch the southeastern part of the country with time.
Well, Greg, it's hard to believe, but we're almost to midsummer, 4th of July holiday week. What do you expect to see that week?
Well, from a temperature standpoint, nothing too extreme, a little above average. That's still 90-ish across a good part of the eastern and southern Corn Belt. Problem is obviously the ongoing dryness and drought stuff. Temperatures about normal southeast, a little bit below average across the Canadian Prairie, back into northern California, the Pacific Northwest. And the setup continues to be a stormy weather pattern for the northern plains, southern Canadian Prairie, very far southern reaches, upper Midwest. This is good news. Hopefully it gets here in time with significant moisture back building through the Ohio Valley and eastern Corn Belt. But this will be a corridor of some pretty tough weather with regard to too much rainfall, Mike. But there's dryness issues as well down south and through Florida.
All right, Greg. Well, let's take a look at the temperature outlook for the week of July 10th. What do you expect?
For now, as we see it right now, here is kind of a realignment of the upper air pattern. We had that trough across the west. It does flatten out, lift into sections of the northern plains, upper Midwest, Canadian Prairie. We're above average here. The heat retrogrades, as it should for this time of the year, back into the southwestern states. This, again, early to mid-June, or July, I should say July, is a setup to really come up with some organized rainfall. Hopefully it won't be too late on the corn and soybean fields, but here it is. Some sense of a couple of weakened tropical systems out of Florida through the southeast, moving back north and west into the Ohio Valley. Wet weather through the eastern parts of the country. A normal precipitation pattern across Kansas and back in through California. And we're back into a much drier weather scenario for Texas as it was, and the desert southwest. No sign of a significant monsoon setup in this particular part of the country. So hang in there, keep the faith. We anticipate rains coming in out of the southeastern states, building into the eastern Corn Belt here in the next 10 days to 2 weeks.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
I have to admit, I really love the control panels of some tractors, and when it's a finely restored tractor, they really stand out. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants are made to make it last. Well, it wasn't too many weeks ago I had a Show Me Your Gauge week. I wanted to take a look at the gauges on various tractors, and this control panel has me thinking maybe we ought to do that again. This is a G900 Minneapolis Moline. Oh, I love those gauges for the oil, the water, the amperage. There's even a cigarette lighter there on the left side, and that blue spinner knob just looks so pretty with all that yellow around it. My friend Dan Hansen at Morris, Illinois, has this mighty fine, made in '69 G900. It's about a 10,000-pound tractor, and when they renew, they cost, somewhere in the neighborhood of $8,000. Made in Minneapolis, at about the time man first walked on the moon. This mini-mow looks just great from any angle. Dan Hansen's G900 at Morris, Illinois. Let's get the weekly report on what's selling at Big Iron Auctions. Mark Stock joins us for that.
Well, hello, Max. Sullivan Auctioneers will be hosting their two-day summer auction with equipment located in Hamilton, Illinois, Huntington, Indiana, and Bird Island, Minnesota. Over 1,000 items selling over 2 days on Monday and Tuesday of next week. And as always, every item represented by the owner and sells with no reserve. And on Wednesday, June the 21st, DJ Auto Sales Inc. from Cedar Rapids, Iowa will sell over 300 items selling classic signs and auto part memorabilia. Sue Angus Cattle Ranch LLC is retiring from Springview, Nebraska, and on Wednesday, June the 21st, they'll be selling a 2022 Titan 24-foot livestock trailer, also selling 2 New Holland mechanical front tractors. And if you're looking for late model John Deere combines, Agrivision Equipment Group LLC with various locations across Iowa, they'll sell 9 John Deere late model combines on Thursday, June the 22nd. 2018, 2019, and 2020 year model S780 combine sell with no reserve, plus a John Deere 8360R mechanical front tractor, a John Deere 560R round baler, and several platform and corn heads. If you're looking to buy quality equipment, check out the equipment selling on Sullivan Auctioneers and on Big Iron.
Our FFA chapter tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. Now it's time to meet that new generation of agriculturalists. This week we're talking to Savannah Goodwin. She's currently serving as the reporter for the Virginia FFA. And Savannah, what was it that prompted you to join FFA?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I joined the FFA in the 6th grade at my middle school, and I joined because I had a passion for horses as a kid, and I knew that there were girls at my high school who had just gone to FFA National Convention to judge horses, and so that was super exciting to me. A lot of my friends were in the club, so I dove right in and found my love for horses, and later found out that the club had a lot more to offer than that. And I'm so glad that I took the leap of faith originally.
Absolutely. So what was it that prompted you to think FFA leadership might be in your future?
Yeah, it was kind of a natural stepping stone at first. My advisor at the time was really interested in making sure that we felt empowered to try out to be an officer in our chapter, and so that we could continue as we moved on up to the high school. So in 8th grade, I took that first leadership position, and it was one of the best first steps that I could take.
And haven't looked back since. Savannah, I understand you were a full-time state officer this year for the Virginia FFA, and I'm curious, what are the reporters' roles in the organization?
Right. So the reporter specifically works on scrapbook and the photos that go into that. So we're nearing convention. We're actually in the middle of convention prep right now as I'm speaking to you. And so I've been working the last month on getting that together. But overall, our officers here in Virginia, there's 9 of us this year. We serve and share a lot of our duties. So whether that's attending a chapter visit, maybe meeting the governor or our Secretary of Agriculture, who are super supportive of us this year, we share a lot of those responsibilities, which is awesome.
Now, looking out longer term, Savannah, do you hope to make agriculture your career?
In a way, yes. I hope to stick with agriculture. I'm not exactly sure what I'd like to do yet, but I know that I've loved advocating for our industry this year. I'd love to continue to do that in some way, whether it's working as a lobbyist or working closer to maybe a more private company. I would love to do something like that in the future.
We need good folks advocating for agriculture. Savannah Goodwin, we wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Sometimes in the summer months, it can be a challenge to find new television programming worth watching. But I've got good news. On July 10th on RFD TV, Season 2 of Farm Next will begin. This is a show spotlighting new technologies and companies in the ag world. And ahead of its premiere, Max had a chance to talk with Chris Abbott, one of the panelists on this season's show, about what it takes to be successful in the world of agriculture.
A lot of these businesses are types of businesses that we see on a daily basis. We invest in food and ag tech companies, primarily in the U.S., but we do take a global perspective. And our whole premise is we want to bring our capital, our access to partners and resources and talent to companies to help them scale. It's a really hard thing to do, especially in food and ag where adoption cycles are slow, building new businesses. And we feel like as a 210-year-old family-owned business, we can be a really powerful partner for those businesses as they enter the commercial realm and help them grow. So this was a great chance for me to be here with Lisa and Karsten. I had just a total fun time, and the entrepreneurs, you can just feel the energy and the passion. And that's the fun part of the job, is being able to spend time with smart people that are very driven. I learn something new every day, and you feed off of the energy.
It strikes me that relatively few are cut out for entrepreneurial spirit, for building an enterprise and following through on it and making it really happen. It has to take a special person, doesn't it?
It totally does. And I say it this way, you could have the best solution and not the best team, or an average solution and a great team. Actually, the average solution and a great team work. So what we tell folks is think about the team, think about the organization you seek to build. What's the right way to do those things? And have the technology that serves the market. If I'm 80% of the way there and you're 100% of the way there, but I've put the time into who are the right partners, what's the right value proposition, spend time with the growers, attract the right people, get behind that mission, have that passion that you're mentioning that an entrepreneur has to have, you'll trump that 100% perfect solution all day long.
Thanks, Max, for that update. It's incredible. There's so much more to think about when it comes to marketing a product than just the product itself. Folks, those contestants are competing for $50,000 on Farm Next and the chance to showcase their products at outdoor farm shows later on this year. Do be sure to tune in July 10th to the Season 2 premiere of Farm Next. Before we let you go, of course, this weekend is Father's Day. For a lot of us, it's a time to celebrate. For some of us, it's a time to remember. And in my case, it's a time to remember. It's hard to believe that 11 years ago this month, my dad suffered a heart attack on the farm. And it's been 11 years that I've not had his wisdom. A lot of you maybe remember my father, Mark Pearson. He was very involved in the world of agriculture, host of Market to Market on public television, The Big Show on WHO radio, and to my mind, just a phenomenal father and a teacher in a lot of the ways about how I'd like to live my life. And even though it's been 11 years since he's been gone, I still think about him all of the time, and I wish I had more of his wisdom close at hand. If you do, celebrate it this weekend. Folks, we'll see you next week, same time, same place, right here.
This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.